Looking down into the depths of the Grand Canyon, geologist Clarence Dutton observed the layers and strata of rocks and sediment along the canyon wall. Curiously, looking at this great natural wonder, he observed horizontal beds of sediment deposited on tilted beds of rock. Understanding principles of geology like uniformitarianism, he knew that for such a result to have occurred, that these two strata of rock were deposited in two separate events. What he observed is known to geologists as an unconformity. So, what is an unconformity? An unconformity is simply a gap in the geologic record where sediment hasn't been deposited or was deposited and been eroded before other rocks are deposited instead. What Clarence Dutton stumbled upon in the Grand Canyon was an angular unconformity, where you had layers of rock which were deposited and then subsequently lifted up at an angle by geologic forces. The tops of these layers were then sheared off, and after a while, new sediment was deposited on top, and these new layers of rock were horizontal. Seeing this, Dutton knew that these strata of rock must have had a gap in time between their formation, since you don't get an angled rock layer and a horizontal layer at the same time. He labelled this the Great Unconformity, though at the time he didn't get to fully appreciate how great it really was, since later radiometric dating revealed the gap in time between these two rock sequences was in fact 1.2 billion years. The Great Unconformity is composed of the Tapete sandstone, which were deposited in a shallow sea during the Cambrian period from 508 to 501 million years ago. Below are the Vishnu schists, which are metamorphic rocks created around 1.75 billion years ago. These are rocks over hundreds of millions of years old, were buried deep in the crust under immense pressure. Sediments and igneous rocks formed eons ago were metamorphosed into the rocks we see today. That means that there's a gap of around 1.2 billion years of missing geologic time, almost a third of Earth's history that has just vanished. And this time covers lots of important moments throughout the Precambrian, so we can't really use these rocks to tell us much about the geologic history of our planet, since they're obviously missing. Now, this begs the question, what caused this gap in the rock record to form? One hypothesis asserts that massive, globe-spanning glaciers sheared off the rock and that later sediments were deposited which form this unconformity. This all happened during the Cryogenian. The Earth was plunged into an ice age and glaciers started to advance all the way to the equator, and along this march, the mile-thick ice sheet grinded up the land, eroding and shearing off the rock. We can find evidence of this in the rock record, as in areas not typically associated with a polar climate, you'll find tillites. These are a type of sedimentary rock formed by glacial processes. The massive ice sheets erode lots of rock, and these grains, pebbles and boulders are combined into a rock held together, usually by a clay matrix. As a result, tillites are poorly sorted with grains of all sorts of sizes. This is one of their main characteristics. This snowball Earth had massive implications not only for the geologic record itself, but for life itself. For the majority of Earth's history, life remained simple, single-celled organisms confined to the oceans. However, some scientists propose that the globe-spanning erosive episode, which was a consequence of the Cryogenian glaciation, caused nutrient-rich sediment to be carried out into the oceans, and all these extra nutrients help life evolve into more complex forms, and that help possibly cause the Cambrian explosion. So while we might have lost important records of Earth's history, this event may have allowed life to develop and flourish and ultimately become what it is today. Though, as with science always, this isn't the only claim or hypothesis. Geologists are still trying to understand what might have caused the Great Unconformity, and while worldwide glaciers are a convenient explanation, they may possibly not line up with the reality. In the geologic record, across the globe, analogues to this Great Unconformity can be found, but in some places it isn't a perfect match all the time. So, that raises the question, if the Great Unconformity can be explained by one global event, then why does the timeline and characteristics of these rocks differ from place to place? Another hypothesis that can help answer this is the breakup of Rodinia, a supercontinent that came before Pangaea. Rodinia started to break up around 750 million years ago. This caused massive erosions which could have contributed to the formation of the Great Unconformity. Using a technique called thermochronology, a team of scientists from UC Santa Barbara examined the ratio of radioactive elements like uranium and thorium and one of their products, helium. Different ratios can indicate how hot the temperature was when the rock formed and thus calculate its depth in the Earth's crust. Knowing this, they can tell if a rock has been eroded or not. They performed this technique on zircon crystals extracted from some granite and learned that erosion took place 1 billion to 720 million years ago, and this doesn't really line up with snowball Earth, but instead with the breakup of Rodinia. The erosion of so much sediment is thought to have had a significant impact on life. Glaciers grounding down mountains, hilltops, and rocks then deposited all this sediment in the oceans, and all of this sediment was rich in nutrients. This event fundamentally changed ocean chemistry, contributing to an increase in calcium, potassium, iron, and magnesium. This sudden increase in these elements gave life the building blocks needed to evolve macroscopic life and could have even contributed to the development of biomineralization. So the hard shells and exoskeletons which makes up the animals of the Cambrian famous could have only been possible by the loss of 1/3 of our planet's geological record. So when Dutton gazed down upon the Grand Canyon and contemplated the causes of the Great Unconformity, he was actually looking at the thing responsible for the natural world now that he so adored.